The clock struck 12:17 a.m., and the Stanley Hotel was silent. But inside room 217 something was very wrong. The guests from nearby rooms would later say they woke to a strange humming sound, like the floorboards were breathing. The lamps flickered. The hallway lights went dark. Then, out of nowhere, boom! A massive explosion shook the entire building. Windows shattered, walls cracked, and smoke filled the hallway. Screams echoed through the night. When the hotel staff rushed upstairs, they found the door to room 217 blown off its hinges. Inside, everything was covered in dust and fire smoke. Everything except for one woman. Elizabeth Wilson, the head chambermaid, lay still on the floor. Her uniform was torn and her face was pale as snow. Everyone thought she was dead. But when the manager knelt beside her, she opened her eyes. Her first words were a whisper. "No one should sleep here anymore." Then her body went limp again. Earlier that day, the Stanley Hotel stood tall and proud in the mountains of Estes Park, Colorado. It was a grand, white building surrounded by pine trees and heavy fog that rolled in every night like a ghostly blanket. People came from all over the country to stay there, rich couples, artists, even famous writers. But behind the beauty of the hotel, the staff whispered about one room that felt different. That room was 217. It had a smell that wouldn't go away even after hours of cleaning. Sometimes the bulbs would burst for no reason. Guests said they heard footsteps above them, even though there was no room upstairs. Elizabeth Wilson didn't believe in ghosts. She'd worked at the hotel for years, and she prided herself on keeping everything spotless. "Ghosts don't scare me," she often said. "Dust does." But that night, she was the one chosen to check the gas lamps in room 217. A storm was coming and the lights kept flickering. So she grabbed her keys, walked down the long empty hallway and unlocked the door. Inside the room the air felt heavy, thicker than usual. The curtains moved slowly, though the windows were shut tight. She sighed and started her work, adjusting each lamp carefully. The last one near the bed hissed softly. She leaned closer with her candle to see what was wrong. That's when she smelled it. Yes. She turned quickly, trying to blow out the candle, but it was too late. The explosion tore through the room like thunder trapped inside a box. Fire roared across the ceiling. The shockwave threw her backward and she hit the floor hard. She could hear people shouting, running, but her body wouldn't move. Then, silence. No pain. No heat. Just silence. When she opened her eyes, she wasn't in the hotel anymore, or so she thought. The room looked the same but wrong. The walls were too white, the clock was ticking backward, and shadows moved even though there was no light. She could see herself, her own body, lying on the floor below. She tried to scream, but her voice made no sound. Something behind her whispered her name. Elizabeth. When she turned around, she saw shapes, people, standing in the doorway, faces she didn't recognize, eyes glowing faintly in the dark. They didn't speak. They only watched her, as if waiting for her to understand something. And when she did, her heart filled with terror. She realized she wasn't dead. But she wasn't alive either. Hours later, firefighters dragged her body from the wreckage. To everyone's shock, she was breathing. Doctors said it was a miracle. She returned to work weeks later, claiming she was fine, but she never spoke about what she saw during those few minutes between life and death. Still, from that night on, the staff noticed something strange. Room 217 was never empty again. Guests reported the smell of burning gas, the feeling of someone tucking them in, or soft footsteps pacing in the dark. One man said he woke up to see a woman standing at the end of his bed, holding a candle and whispering, "Don't light it." The hotel tried closing the room. It didn't help. Every time they locked the door, the key would appear back on the front desk the next morning. One stormy night, years later, a new guest checked into room 217. He had heard the rumors and wanted to see for himself if it was true. He laughed at the staff who warned him not to stay there. At midnight, he turned off the lamp, stretched on the bed and said out loud, "If this room is haunted, prove it." A few seconds later, the lights flickered. Then the door slowly opened by itself. And standing there was a woman in a maid's uniform, holding a candle, the same candle Elizabeth once carried. She smiled faintly and said, "Welcome back." The candle flame flickered, and the entire hotel plunged into darkness. The lights went out. Darkness swallowed the entire Stanley Hotel like a mouth closing shut. The guest in room 217, Mr. Howard Briggs, blinked in the blackness, his heart pounding. The candlelight from the maid's hand glowed faintly across the room. He tried to speak, but his voice stuck in his throat. "Who are you?" he whispered. The woman didn't move closer, but the light around her face flickered just enough for him to see the pale shine of her eyes. She looked calm, too calm. Her voice came out like a soft breeze. "You shouldn't have called me." Then the candle blew itself out, though there was no wind. The hotel awakens. Downstairs, the night clerk was typing the next day's guest list when the power cut off. The typewriter keys froze mid-stroke. For a second, the silence was complete. Then, from the upper floors, came the unmistakable sound of footsteps. Many footsteps. But there was only one guest checked into the second floor that night, Howard Briggs in room 217. The clerk grabbed his flashlight and ran up the grand staircase. The hallways were colder than usual, and his breath fogged the air. As he reached the door of 217, he heard muffled voices, one of them male, one female, both trembling and overlapping. He knocked. No answer. He turned the knob. Lock. But then a whisper drifted from the other side. "Help me." He stepped back, and the door slowly unlocked itself with a click. Back inside the room, Howard crouched beside the bed, clutching the sheets. The air was thick, hard to breathe. He could feel something cold brushing his shoulder, like fingers that weren't really there. The candle was gone, but a faint bluish glow pulsed from the corner of the room near the dresser. When he looked toward it, he saw her again. The maid. Elizabeth Wilson. Only now she didn't look calm. Her eyes were hollow, and her lips were whispering words too fast to understand. The wallpaper behind her began to ripple, like waves in water, and faint outlines of faces pressed out from inside the wall, screaming silently. Howard stumbled backward, knocking over the chair. "What do you want from me?" he cried. The maid's head turned sharply toward him. "To finish what began that night." Then she vanished. The door burst open and the night clerk rushed in, flashlight in hand. "Sir, are you all right?" he shouted. Howard spun around, eyes wide. She was here. The maid, she talked to me. The clerk frowned. "There's no maid working tonight. Only me and the cook." He shone the light around the room. The bed was untouched, the air still smoky, and the faint smell of gas lingered. The curtains swayed even though the windows were sealed. Howard's hands shook. She said her name. Elizabeth. The clerk froze. "Don't say that name here," he whispered, lowering his voice. "You shouldn't even know it." The story behind the silence. Later that night, after the power returned, the clerk poured Howard a drink in the empty dining hall and finally told him the story. "Elizabeth Wilson was a maid here in 1911, he began. "She was fixing a gas lamp in this very room when it exploded. Blew her across the hall. They said she died, but she didn't. She woke up and went back to work. Everyone thought it was a miracle." He stared at the tabletop. "But she changed. She started locking herself in room 217, cleaning when no one asked her to. Some nights, other maids heard her talking to herself. Then one day she vanished. No one saw her leave. And the room's been strange ever since." Howard listened quietly, the glass trembling in his hand. "So you think she's still here?" The clerk nodded slowly. "We don't think. We know. Every guest who mocks her or stays alone in that room meets her sooner or later." Howard leaned forward. "And what happens to them?" The clerk hesitated before answering. "Some check out early. Others don't check out at all. Back upstairs." After midnight, the hotel finally calmed. Howard was given another room to sleep in, but he couldn't rest. His mind replayed the maid's words again and again. After midnight, the hotel finally calmed. Howard was given another room to sleep in, but he couldn't rest. His mind replayed the maid's words again and again. Finish what began that night. What did she mean? He stared out the window toward the dark second floor where room 217 waited. Through the fog he could see faint light under the door, even though the power was still unstable. He decided to go back. Every step down the carpeted hallway creaked louder than it should. The air grew colder the closer he got. When he reached room 217, the door stood slightly open, swinging softly like someone had just entered. Howard swallowed his fear and pushed it open. The room looked normal, at first. The bed was made. The candle sat on the nightstand unlit. The air smelled faintly of roses. Then he noticed something new on the floor near the bed, a burn mark, perfectly round, black and fresh. Right above it, on the wall, someone had written in faded brown letters, "Welcome back, Elizabeth." The candle on the nightstand lit by itself. Howard gasped. The flame grew brighter, burning blue instead of orange, and from behind him came the sound of footsteps, slow, heavy, deliberate. He turned. Standing in the doorway was a woman, not the ghostly maid this time, but another guest, pale, shaking, eyes wide. "She's downstairs," the woman whispered. She's walking the halls again. The candle flickered violently. The smell of gas filled the air. And before Howard could move, the flame leapt from the candle.